Welcome. In this video we are going to create APIs in the Spring Boot application which will perform CRUD operations on MongoDB. In previous video we created a database Spring Boot test, and inside it we created a collection called employee. Now if you open this employee collection, then you can see that it is empty as of now. So let's jump to our Spring Boot application and start making the APIs. First I will create a package called model. Inside this I will create an employee class which represents our employee collection in MongoDB. Now this employee class needs to be annotated with document annotation. This annotation indicates that object of this class are the documents for this collection. You can specify the collection name in the parameter. Now I will add some fields here such as ID, name, age, salary, and a boolean flag is active. I'll also specify the ID annotation on this ID field to specify that it is the primary key. Lastly, I will add the Lombok annotations, data for generating getters and setters, no argument constructor, and all argument constructor. Now I'll create a repository package. Inside this I will create employee repository interface. This employee repository will extend Mongo repository, and just like JP repository, we need to specify employee class here and its primary key data type, that is long. Lastly, I will annotate it with repository annotation. Now I will create a package service. And I will create a service interface here and name it as employee service. Here I'll be defining some CRUD operations for which I'll be creating APIs. First one would be create employee. This will add employee in database. It will also have a request parameter which I'll define later. Second will be get employee by ID, and it will have an ID parameter. Third, we will be getting list of employees by a name. It will have a name parameter. Fourth would be update employee. And last would be delete employee by ID. Now I will create a package DTO. Inside this I will create employee DTO class which will be my request body. The fields for this class will be same as employee class, so I will just copy it from here and paste it in this class. And add the Lombok's data annotation on this class. Now let's create the controller package. Inside this I will create employee controller class. I will add REST controller annotation on this, and I will also add request mapping annotation with endpoint as employee. Now I will create a post API using post mapping annotation and provide the endpoint as add. The return type of this method will be the response entity of type employee, and method name can be add employee. And the request body will be the employee DTO. Then I will get the employee object from employee service method create employee. Now I need to auto-wire employee service as well. For this I will be using constructor injection. And I will pass this employee DTO object in this method. And I will return this employee object wrapped in response entity.ok. Note that I'm just showing you a positive scenario, and thus I'm not handling any exceptions or adding any validations. but in real-world application, you might want to add those based on your requirements. Now let's create the implementation class for our employee service. So I will create a class called employee service IMPL. And this will implement the employee service. I will annotate it with that service. Now we need to provide implementation for the methods of employee service. First I'm gonna be auto-wiring employee repository. Again I will use constructor injection. Now for create employee we need to have the employee DTO. So I will add it on the service method create employee, and also on update employee. Similarly in employee service IMPL also. Now in create employee method, I will create a new employee object. Using bean utils I am copying all the fields from employee DTO to employee object. Now I will just call and return employee repository.save and pass employee object. With this our post API is ready. Now let's write a get API. For this I will use mapping with endpoint as get. So I will write a method and name it as find employee by ID. And I will add long ID as request parameter. Now here I will get employee object by calling the employee service method get employee by ID, and pass the ID as argument. And again I will return the employee object wrapped in response entity. Now I will quickly create another get API. This will return the list of employees having common name. I will add the endpoint as get all. And the request parameter will be string name. Service method will be get employee list by name, and argument will also be name. This will return list of employees. Next I will create the update API. This will be a put mapping with endpoint as update. Here also I will be accepting employee DTO as request body. And I will get the updated employee object after calling employee service.update employee, and pass employee DTO here. And then I will just return it as usual. Lastly I will create a delete API with delete mapping and endpoint as delete. This will also have a request parameter of long ID. And I just noticed that I have written path variable here instead of request param. So let me just correct it in all places. Here I will just call the employee service method and pass the ID field here. From this method I will only return a success message. With this, our controller methods are ready, and once again I would like to specify that this is just a demo, so I have not added any validations, but if you want you can add it here also. Now let's provide the implementation for the rest of the methods. In getEmployee by ID method, I will call the query method find by ID from user repository. And since it returns an optional object, so I will call get method on this. In enterprise applications, you should not call the get method directly like this because you may get null pointer exception. But I will keep it like this because right now we're covering only positive scenarios. In getEmployees method, we need to call employee repository.find by name, and pass the name string here. Now we need to create this method in the employee repository. Now for update employee method, we need to perform two things. First we need to find the employee which has the same ID as we got from the request. So here I will again use the query method find by ID, and pass employee dto.getID. You can also directly call the above getEmployee by ID method. Now again we will use bean utils to copy the updated values from employee DTO to employee object. And I will save this using employee repository.save method and return this. Now last in the delete employee method, I will just call the query method delete employee by ID from employee repository. With this our CRUD APIs are ready. Now let's run this application and test it using Postman. Now our application is up and running, so let's open Postman and call our first API. First I will call the add employee API. For that the URL will be localhost:8080/employee/add. HTTP method will be post. And in body I will add the employee data. First it will be an ID with let's say a value of 101. Second field is name, and let's say the name is Tom. Third field is age. Fourth is salary. And last field is active. Click on send, and we got a 200 response, which means our data is successfully inserted in the database. Now let's check the Mongo compass. Click on refresh. Here you can see the data has been inserted. You can see the data in JSON or tabular view also. Now let's add another employee with ID 102, same name, but other fields different. Click on send. I'll just add one more employee so that we can test further APIs. Let's check in compass. Now we have successfully inserted 3 employees. Let's test getEmployee by ID API. For that the URL will be localhost:8080/employee/get. And we'll pass parameter ID as 101. Click send, and here you can see the data of employee 101. Now let's test the getEmployee by name API. And I'll pass the name parameter as Tom. Send the request, and here you can see that we got 2 results because both have same name Tom. Now let's test the update API. Here I will be updating salary and is active flag for employee 103. Click on send, and we got a 200 response, so let's check the Mongo compass. Click on refresh, and you can see the updated data got reflected here. Finally let's check the delete API. For this the URL will be localhost:8080/employee/delete. HTTP method will be delete, and I will add the ID parameter here with value 102. We got the success message, so let's go to Mongo compass and click refresh. Here you can see the data got deleted. With this our CRUD APIs are completed. In the next video I will show you how you can use query annotation for adding native queries in Spring Data MongoDB. Thank you for watching.